Hi everyone. I'm presenting a paper titled Negation Typology and General Representation Models for Cross-Lingual Zero-Shot Negation Scope Resolution in Russian, French, and Spanish. My name is Anastasia Shaitarova and I'm from the University of Zurich in Switzerland. My supervisor for this project was Fabio Rinaldi. We also present our work as a poster, so if you wish, please come talk to me during a poster session. Negation detection has been extensively researched by the NLP community. Reliable negation detection is vital in biomedical text mining, sentiment analysis, machine translation, and other applications. The task itself consists of two parts: negation cue detection, those are units that carry negative meaning, and negation scope resolution, that is identifying the part of the sentence that is affected by the cue. In this project, we build upon our previous work and follow three objectives. Since we worked with multilingual BERT before, just as XLMR was coming out, now we wanted to see if the new, bigger model would perform better and measure the difference. Second, we noticed that Russian is an under-resourced language in terms of negation detection. We were only able to locate one paper on negation detection in Russian on both the English and Russian-speaking internet. To the best of our knowledge, there are no publicly available negation corpora in Russian on any other Slavic language. Thus, we wanted to promote this line of research. Finally, even though classifying languages based on negation is not a new idea, that classification for NLP is novel. Recently published research inspired us to analyze our results in conjunction with the negation typology of our languages. Our corpora are all publicly available. The three English corpora have served as classic benchmarks for negation detection for many years. Bioscope includes scientific papers in the domain of bioinformatics. Conan Doyle Neg is a literary corpus, and SFU Review is a large corpus of product reviews. Although they belong to different domains, we combined them into one dataset. We based this decision on a successful cross-corpora knowledge transfer for negation detection by Candelval et al. In 2020. The Spanish corpus is a Spanish counterpart of SFU Review and also contains online reviews. The French corpus contains clinical texts. In order to work with Russian, we annotated a Russian translation of a short story about Sherlock Holmes, which is also included in the Conan Doyle Neg corpus. Pursuing our first objective, to compare the two models, we looked at their vocabularies and calculated lexical overlap between the datasets based on a model-specific tokenization. On the left, you can see the vocabulary size of each dataset. The numbers in the gray columns are based on mBERT's tokenization into subwords. The white column shows XLMR sentence piece units. On the right, you see lexical overlap percentages. For example, the Russian vocabulary shares 35% of its subwords or 31% of its sentence pieces with the English vocabulary. In other words, if we fine-tune an mBERT model on the English data and then test it on the Russian dataset, 35% of the Russian subwords will be exactly the same as in the fine-tuning data. Now, if we take this table and rearrange the results hierarchically, we will see that models fine-tuned on English have most advantages in French, whereas French brings least lexical knowledge to the other datasets. If we examine the situation with Russian, we can hypothesize that the English-Russian transfer could be most advantageous. Now, let's look at the experiment results. Again, mBERT scores are in gray and XLMR in white. We did not fine-tune on Russian, only on English, French, and Spanish. And we did not test on English. The bottom row shows evaluations of models that were fine-tuned on data reduced to the size of the smallest corpus, which for us is the French corpus. So here, all models were fine-tuned on an equal number of sentences. We see that models fine-tuned on French performed the worst, just as we expected based on the lexical overlap. On the other hand, the transfer from English to French did not turn out to be as advantageous as the lexical data suggests. Based on the lexical overlap information, Russian should have benefited most from English, regardless of the model. However, the experiment results show that most benefit for Russian comes from Spanish, especially when using XLMR. The low percentage of lexical overlap between French and other languages might be responsible for the lower F1 scores of the French models. Nevertheless, it does not explain the other results. Besides, negation scope resolution is inherently a syntactic issue, and other factors might be outweighing the influence of a shared vocabulary. That said, we constructed negation typology for our languages. Linguistic typology has been shown to play a prominent role in zero-shot knowledge transfer. Even though English, French, Spanish, and Russian are in the same linguistic family and feature the same subject-verb-object pattern, a typology based on negation assigns them to different categories. We use 4 different features drawn from several sources to construct our typology. Here is more about each feature. First of all, we look at the way a language handles a situation when more than one negation cue are present in one sentence. Negative concord languages treat them as one, letting negative markers intensify one another. The majority of languages, including French, Spanish, and Russian, belong to the negative concord group. Standard English, on the other hand, is a double negation language where each negative marker is interpreted separately. Here in this Russian sentence, 2 negation cues express one semantic negation. Я ничего такого не видел. A verbatim translation would be I nothing, such, not, saw. This can be translated into English as I saw nothing or I didn't see anything. As we can see, English allows only one negation cue in a sentence. Now, going counterclockwise, the next 2 features were taken from the World Atlas of Language Structure online. Pred-neg indicates whether negative indefinite pronouns require an additional negative particle. This feature is related to the first one. In this sentence, the indefinite negative pronoun ничего is not enough to form a negation. The verb requires another negation particle. Next, symmetricity indicates whether negative constructions exhibit structural differences in comparison to the corresponding affirmative sentences. Here we see that Russian is a symmetric type, since the verb preserves all of its grammatical categories in the presence of negation. Additionally, we involve Dahl's classification. He created a large negation typology back in the 70s. For example, Russian belongs to a S11-12 category because an uninflected particle is added, the finite verb does not change, and the negative marker is before the verb. So based on our 4 features, we calculate a typological similarity between the languages. We see that Russian is closest to Spanish. In fact, they are the closest languages in our typology. They share 3 out of 4 features fully and 1 feature partially. If we look at the experiment results again, we might consider that the successful transfer from Spanish to Russian might be explained through this negation typology. Yet if we look at the other results for Russian, we see that they do not entirely correspond to the typological hierarchy. Additionally, we conducted a small error analysis and investigated a prominent phenomenon that emerges in several categories of our negation typology. That is, negative indefinite pronouns, words like nothing, nowhere, nobody. The way a language handles these pronouns is reflected in both the Pred-neg and NCDN categories. This phenomenon alone classifies Russian and English as polar opposites. We'll look at the XLMR output on the Russian test set. So this sentence contains an indefinite negative pronoun ничего, or nothing. About 20% of the sentences in our Russian test set contain these pronouns. They're always annotated as cues. However, the English XLMR model included them into the scope half of the time. On the other hand, the XLMR models trained on Spanish and French did not have this problem at all. So, to summarize, we performed cross-lingual zero-shot negation scope resolution in Russian, French, and Spanish, using multilingual BERT and XLMR Roberta as models. We compared the performance of the two models and concluded that XLMR performs reliably better than MBERT on this task. We annotated a small test set in Russian with negation cues and scopes and showed that cross-lingual zero-shot transfer from Spanish benefits Russian the most. We constructed a negation typology and correlated our results with it. Through qualitative analysis, we showed that certain negation features might play a decisive role in the task of cross-lingual zero-shot negation scope resolution. Thank you for your attention.